I'm Vicky from Visits Collective. We are the team running Q Visits this year and into 2024. With me today are Kate, do you want to give a wave, and Catherine. So we are 3 out of a team of 5 people who are going to be curating the visits for you over the next couple of years. And a huge thank you and welcome to Act Build Change. We are incredibly pleased to have them as your first visit hosts, well, the first that we are working with. You'll get to meet them properly very soon, but for now, I'll introduce them by name and ask them to give a wave too. So, Stephanie and Imani and Catherine, and I think we're going to have Dami and Molly joining shortly, and Louis we have. Great, thank you. So this morning at Build Change, are going to be giving you an introduction to community organising. You'll get to meet some brilliant community organisers, including Louis, who's just waved at you, and hear and discuss their stories. And then you'll have a chance to have a dive into an organising tool called One-to-Ones and get a chance to practice that. There will also be a couple of breaks. We're aware it's a long session, so there'll be 2 breaks for you. And obviously fine, thank you for letting us know if you're needing to leave early. We are going to give you a chance to connect in a moment in small groups to meet each other, and then you're going to be in breakout rooms again later. So hopefully you'll get to meet some other people then. You probably won't get to meet everybody who's on this call today, but just to remind you that in the pack that we sent out to you, we sent you a PDF, and that's got a list of everyone who's signed up for the session. So you'll be able to see who else was interested in this and connect with them afterwards. You've obviously also just got a flavour, if you scroll through the chat now, of where people are joining from. And also in the pack that I just mentioned, we've got a curiosity canvas. So if you didn't have a chance to have a look at the pack, it might be worth pulling that up in the break and either quickly printing it or making a copy electronically. That's a tool that we've given you to help you record what you're curious about, what you're noticing, and any ideas, make a note of any ideas or connections that you would really like to follow up afterwards. So hopefully that will be a useful tool for you.
Shall I just flash that up on the screen, Vicky, just to remind you?
Yes, great.
So the curiosity canvas in your packs, just to share with you, this is what it looks like. And so there's some instructions in your pack around how to download it from Google Slides, how to download it as a PDF, or just like Vicky said, you can print it if you prefer as well. So yeah, on page 12 of the pack, that's what you're looking for. There you go.
Great, thank you, Kate. So in your breakout rooms in a moment, we'd like you to just briefly introduce yourselves, and then to get us into the topic gently, we'd like you to recall a conversation that has changed your way of thinking in some way. It might have been recent, it might have been from a very long time ago, it might be in a work context, it might be not in a work context. So if you share a conversation that you've had that's changed your way of thinking, we're going to put you in groups of 3 or 4, and we'll give you, looking at the time now, we'll give you about 7 minutes, I think. So you have plenty of time. So Kate, are you?
I'm nearly there. And while I'm doing that, do you want to just mention about captions? If people want to turn that on, just let people know.
Yes, so we are using closed captioning for this session. So hopefully you should all have the ability to turn that on if you want it.
Thanks, Vicky. And if you have any issues with that or anything tech related at all, feel free to send me a direct message in the chat, and I'll try and help. Those breakout rooms are ready, so I'll open them up now, and yeah, we'll look forward to hearing back from you in a little while.
Enjoy meeting each other.
"30 seconds, so they're on their way back. Welcome back, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm just going to ask a question and you can nod. Did that feel like it went quite quickly? Yeah, always. Sorry about that. Hopefully you'll get a chance to discuss and learn together more as we go through the morning. Really keen now to hand over to Stephanie so that we can you can enjoy as much time as possible with your host, and we're all still here ready to look after you if you need it as well. So Stephanie,
hello, welcome everyone. I've just been spotlighted, so I can't
right?
Yeah, so I can't see you all, so I'm going to just unspotlight myself so I can see all your faces. Thank you so much for the people in my breakout room who shared so much, and there's going to be things that I'm going to bring back into the space. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Stephanie Wong, and I'm the director of an organisation called Act Build Change. And I'm joined by fabulous colleagues in the space who will introduce themselves as they show up and speak about the work that they're doing. But what Act Build Change is essentially is we are a community organising school, and we roam down from Devon all the way up to Glasgow, to Northern Ireland, and all the way in the middle. And our purpose is to support those that are experiencing injustice to be able to have access to the tools and relationships of community organising, because we believe it is a fundamental methodology to build power, and so that more of us can change the issues that are happening to us. And I've been a community organiser for over a decade now. I spend most of my time now though coaching and supporting other people to organise. And today is really about giving you, for those of you that are brand new, to be able to leave this room and say, I know what community organising is as a methodology. And for those of you that are like, I know what it is, but I'd like to get a flavour of some of the tools, to leave with our fundamental tool, which is the one-to-one. And so that's all from me for now, but I'm going to pass over to my fantastic colleague, Amani, who is going to bring us into an exercise to learn more.
Hello, everyone. Shall I share slides? Hi, everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Steph. I'm Imani. I am Curator of Partnerships and Community here at Build Change. So I support our partners, our community organisers, those that we work with in terms of the different projects that they're working on, but also broadening our scope as well, bringing in people who are new to community organising and thinking about how we can share our learning and the community organising methodology with more people. And to kick us off, I'm going to give us a bit of an introduction as to what community organising is, organising in leadership, and a bit of context with some examples of those organisations that we work quite closely with, and how they're using organising in their work. So the first thing I'm going to ask is an open question of what do you see on the screen that I'm sharing at the moment. And if you just use the chat box, or I'd invite you to take yourselves off mute as I'm struggling to see this chat box at the same time at the moment. But if you just share, what do you see on the screen?
So Joe's saying arrows and dots.
Yeah, definitely arrows and dots. What do you think these arrows and dots might represent? Any ideas around that?
Afra is sharing 3 different visuals. Matthew, inwards and outward dynamics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Naomi saying things done to us and then by us, and the 2 is with 2 big capital letters, so that's quite interesting.
Yeah, okay. I think I'll leave on that, because that leads us into a bit of context around what am I actually sharing here. So the images demonstrate what we might see in teams and in organizational leadership at work. And we're not saying that these other ways of leadership aren't important, but it's about within organising, it's distinctive in its way of shaping sustainable long-term change where more of us can participate. So that's what we're seeing here. So in the first picture, what you see is one person in the middle with everything coming to them, which we might refer to as the expert model, which is very much a top-down approach, no questions asked. And in the second picture, we see people in the middle and ideas going out. So delivering and people being able to act on their ideas, what we might call a mobilizing strategy. And in the third and final picture, what we see is people going off and delivering their own ideas. And there isn't much structure here. And this is often where we get that siloed working. So that's what we're seeing here. But where we would like to be, if I just move us on to the next slide, is in this organising snowflake model, where we can see leadership being distributed in a more relational way, where it ensures that no one in the group holds all that power. And you can see that you've got arrows going in different directions and people coming back in. So the information is flowing and sharing. And the snowflake model here is based on being able to trust others. And we know that when people are able to share and distribute that power, that's where movements hold their strength. And it's with that commitment and the capacity to be able to share that leadership where we're able to have a responsibility to move things forward and scale our work and create that leaderful cultures. But essentially what we're saying is we're creating teams with a leadership structure so that we can grow together through that collaborative approach, and where we've got people being able to bring the learning out and bring that learning back in. And we've got an example here of an organisation that we've worked with quite closely, where we can talk you through a bit more around the stages of organising and what that means. So Grapevine is a disability justice organisation, and they use their partnerships and community relationships to build power. And they work in ways that strengthen their relationship with others through narrative, listening, and this is to avoid being extractive in their approach. And in the picture, you can see there are 3 people from Grapevine in Coventry. They are a disability justice organisation, and we've worked with them for over 4 years now, alongside their service delivery and policy and legal work. At Build Change, we've supported them to adopt a community organising approach to their work. And we've supported them to see how an organising approach can complement the disability justice work so that they're able to move forward with initiating local campaigns, working with doing online campaigning around hate online towards disabled people. And they've been able to take Facebook to task through adopting a community organising approach as well. They recognise that their legal work is still necessary, but adopting principles of organising alongside their work has allowed them to pool their people, resource and power, which is what we refer to this as. And you can see also in the picture that they're doing a mapping exercise, which is often what we do when we're thinking about who are the people that we need to help us move forward with the change that we want to see, who's perhaps missing in these situations and conversations, and who will be benefiting from the work that we do. So this is just a bit of a whistle-stop tour as to community organising, how we do it, introducing you to public narrative and how we find the values to answer the questions that we really want to be moving forward with, and understanding the value of having those one-to-ones when we're thinking about big campaign work, and the importance of listening to build those relationships that we need. So Steph, I'll hand over to you if there's anything you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, so I'm just going to add a few things, and then I'm going to hand over to Catherine to give us a bit of a context to this work around health. But I guess there's something about why organising. So if we go back to those dots, and I was really appreciating everything that was going in the chat box. So why do we organise? Well, we organise on issues that we know that the individual cannot solve. So these are things, so Imani was using the word campaign, but these could be actions, these could be initiatives, but it's a real recognition around there is something in the world as it is that we do not want in the world as it should be. And those things that are in the world as it is cannot be solved alone. And it's really recognizing that that is around also about our ability to act. which is our power. And so community organising believes that one, leadership is a practice, it is not a position. So it's something that all of us can do. And we understand leadership here as an ability to bring others to act in uncertainty. So who are the people that you have relationships with who can bring others to act in uncertainty for change? And then we ask these 3 questions, which will come up later, which is, first of all, what am I called to do? So my first ever action was, I am called to do something around debt, because this is affecting my life and it's affecting my family and it's affecting others' families. But who is my constituency on which I want to act together, which is that second question? Well, it's this estate, and actually there's a church across the street and there's a synagogue, and maybe there's other people that also care about these issues. And then it's, what are we called to do now, which is that space of action. And the one-to-one conversation, which we're going to be looking at later, is like, how do we have these types of conversations that support people to be able to act on the issues that matter to them? And that can start really small. So in that picture that you can see there, it started off with 1 in 4 young people get to spend only 1 hour outside of a weekend who have a disability. There is an issue here that we want to take action on, but who on earth will join us around this issue? And then the image below is them building that collective and sharing story at the very beginnings of their action. And I'm not going to share any more about what they've won, because you're going to have Molly share it all, who is one of the organisers there. I'm just going to now pass it over to Catherine for some final reflections.
Thanks very much, Steph. And I was just joking in my breakout conversation that I'm getting used to using Zoom again, having had it firewalled within the NHS for a couple of years. So sorry, I'm slow coming off mute. Hello, everybody. For those of you that I've not yet met, my name's Catherine Pereira. I work with Steph and her team at Build Change. My capacity there is as a member of the board, but I'm also bringing another perspective to the conversation today, because in my day job, I'm a director in NHS England, the Director for Improvement, Capability Building and Delivery. So what I wanted to do was to offer, if you like, a bridge between some of what Steph and team will be exploring in the session and how it relates to the NHS, to healthcare and to health. I'm a community organiser by background, so I spent 6 years running community organising projects in and around London and then nationally, 2010 to 2016. I then did teaching in community organising practice before finding my way into a small, beautiful team called NHS Horizons in 2016. And it's now my great privilege to lead that team, and I can see some team fellows on the call smiling at me. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about work that other people on the call will have been involved with and will have led. So to orientate this into healthcare and to perhaps provide a context for what Steph and team are describing and how it links to healthcare. In 2010, 13 years ago, an improvement leader in the NHS reached out by email to a man called Marshall Gantz. Marshall Gantz is a community organiser, a civil rights activist. He was one of the student organisers for the Montgomery bus boycott during the civil rights campaigns in the United States. He then went on to organise with the Farm Workers Union in the United States. And in about 1990, he returned to his university where he had failed to complete his degree when he had gone off to Mississippi to work on the bus boycotts and related organising work. And that's Harvard, which is in Boston. And he returned to Boston and started researching and attempting to put a structure around some of this work. The improvement leader who 13 years ago reached out to him was a woman called Helen Bevan. I know that many people on the call will know Helen, but not all. And she wrote a message that went like this: "Dear Marshall, we need your help to save the NHS." So for those who know Helen, a very Helen sort of message. What she was alluding to was the bridge that she saw, the potential for the ideas that Steph and Imani, Louis and others that you're going to outline, to be a new frontier, part of a next frontier of thinking about quality improvement in healthcare and in health more widely. And that there is a strong link and many analogies that we can draw between the work that we do to improve quality and to improve health in a much wider context and framing, and the principles of community organising. Helen was also trying to root this in terms of a growing understanding across the NHS and wider activism in support of better health outcomes to social movement thinking. But of course, the history of these ideas goes back thousands of years, first written and recorded nearly 2,000 years ago. And it also sits in the DNA of the NHS. The NHS, in my view, was founded on a promise for a movement for change. It is based on social movement work that coalesced around a movement and a moment where, as Steph said, we could imagine the world differently. And a central foundational principle of access for everyone, free at the point of use, on the basis of our need. And the examples that you're going to hear from, which I'm really excited to also kind of be part of and hear from, you know, whether it's Grapevine, whether it's work with people who are seeking their rights to be respected and recognised from perspectives of immigration, or whether it's examples of work that's being done in and around healthcare, they speak to, I believe, that foundational promise. And it is closely linked to the work that many of us do in using quality improvement methodology to improve our services and ultimately to improve outcomes for everyone, all people, whether staff or patients, or indeed people in their communities. So I think the final thing I just wanted to offer is that one of the things I love about this session is it's a chance for us to, yes, have a field visit where we're stepping outside, but in a sense we're going to be seeing the adjacent possible, because so much of this is already in train through the work that we're doing from our respective positions. And this is a chance to think creatively about the promise that community organising gives us, and that promise is to meaningfully involve and include, and to focus on questions around equity, questions around parity of voice, questions for me around the real meaning of how we create interdependency as we think about designing a healthcare system and a wider understanding of health for the future. So Steph, I'm going to hand back to you to see if you want to add anything to that.
No, I was going to ask if we would be able to be put into some breakout rooms actually, to have like a conversation of what is this bringing up for you? Maybe this is making you think about your own experience. Yeah, so just to have like a bit of time to reflect on what we've heard, and any questions. There could be loads of questions that are bubbling up, so we can start to bring those into the space.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, no problem. I'll open up those breakout rooms now, and enjoy your conversations. Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back, folks. We have a bit of time. I'd love to hear some of the reflections, questions that were coming up for you. And you can put it in the chat, speak into the space. But I'm going to start with the room that I got to be part of. So that was with Cleo, Sue, and Jamila. And I hope I'm saying those names correctly, and correct me if I'm not. I don't know if anybody from that room wants to speak, or you want me to start and then add.
You start, we'll add.
Thanks, Cleo, in the epic living room. So we had like a really rich conversation around, it started off with an acceptance and urgency around the need to centre the power of communities more. So that's what Sue brought in straight away. And then it kind of shifted into this conversation around hard to reach, difficult to reach, and a real feeling in the room around the tensions of that. And that was both in a NHS context, but actually it was spoken about also in an international development context, and the experiences and expertise that have come before, you know, entering these different roles. And what does that mean, and who are we centering when we say hard to reach? Hard to reach for who, and why is it that way? We also had a conversation around active listening and what that means. And we also had a conversation around power and empowerment. So when Cleo, Sue, and Jamila were speaking, it was making me think about the difference between empowerment and power, which we speak a lot about in organising. So someone in the space shared going from a place of like professional, even though all of us are patients, going from professional and into a much more space of patient, and realizing, even with the privilege and knowledge that they had, how difficult still it was. So what would that mean if you didn't have that? And that was making me think about empowerment and power. So empowerment, we may feel confident, but actually if that doesn't translate into power, which is the job we talk about a lot in organising, that doesn't then change the systems that we need in order to be able to better serve and work alongside people. I don't know if I've done an all right job of that, but team, come in if I've missed anything.
No, you did a brilliant job. I think we also talked about when decisions are made about how we care for people, when the people that we are serving are not even in the room, and so are not able to be part of the conversation. And that's got to change. Otherwise we'll get it wrong, because we can only come at often quite complex problems from our perspective and our point of view. And I think that's what led us into I've heard a lot over a long career, but we're all patients, but we're really, really not. Because of that difference in perspective, that difference in knowledge, that difference in experience, when you are served by a system that you are not a working part of.
Thank you, Cleo. I see lots of nodding heads. I don't know if anybody else would like to come in. You can put an emoji up or a reaction and I can have a look at you. I can try and find you around reflections or questions. Hazel. Welcome, Hazel.
Hello. So we were talking about how it can feel really, really massive, kind of doing something differently and starting something new, and how the enormity of how it can feel, and how often actually it's often something small as a starting point. Like, you don't have to take on the system like as your starting point. It's often something quite small that you can do that has this amazing butterfly effect, and kind of it's real change where it's needed. And we also talked about how in the NHS it feels like the tide is turning in terms of a lot more conversation around involvement of patient service units, community, a lot more talk about sort of population health, and how that's, you know, it's the opportunity seems to be there now where it hasn't felt like that before.
Hazel, there's something there that when you were speaking, it really reminds me of something when I was a much younger organizer and I first started speaking to Catherine Pereira, and I felt a lot overwhelmed. about some of the fights or actions that I was part of that's felt like, where do I go from here? Or is that even a victory? And you were speaking to those small things, and Catherine said to me, Stephanie, these are commas, not full stops. And I'll never forget that, around like, how are we taking those small steps of those commas, not full stops? And Hazel, you also spoke, so that's like your critical eye. And then you spoke to your hopeful heart around where are things changing and where are the possibilities of that. We've got a couple more minutes. Does anybody else want to come in, or anyone from the team want to share some reflections?
Steph, I was just going to put, while people are thinking in the chat box, I think, Hazel, you're so right about how massive it can feel, and that can be overwhelming, and that we can chunk it up. And I was reflecting on, so Kate Pound is on the session. Kate and I haven't seen each other in a while, but do kind of connect with Kate around some of the history of this work in a healthcare context, because Kate was part of co-developing NHS Change Day nearly a decade ago. And that was about, what one small step can I take in my context to make the NHS better today? And by year 3, 850,000 people took part in a day of action. And that's 850,000 small steps that adds up to a profound difference that then has ripple effects, personally, team-based, organisationally, and actually in creating space in the system to have these sorts of conversations. So it's how do we do it piece by piece?
Final reflection before we go on our break, if anyone would like to add anything or a question that's coming up for them.
Sorry, I can't see where to put my hand up. If you
Hey,
don't mind me coming. Hi. Yeah, completely. The conversation is great today, and you know, one of my frustrations that I often feel is that the people don't often just think, you know, creating a movement just happens without any work, and actually there is a huge amount of organising that has to go on to do that. And I think people forget that, but actually by using that time to organise, you actually get and understand the heart of actually what this is about. You understand, you listen, and you learn more about the people that you're working with. And you know, we mustn't skip those steps, because actually that takes you to the foundation of what you want, you know, what the changes that you want to move. And you know, if we skip that, then we're losing the point. So I just really wanted to emphasize that. And you know, as Catherine said, NHS Change Day, you know, was created almost a tidal wave of movement, and it was about thousands of people in the NHS raising their voices and saying, you know, we want to do things differently, we want change, we want better. And you know, being together in that, joining that force together was just phenomenal, and you know, changed my life forever, I would say. So I was just going to say those bits. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. And so that relational, the work that goes in to get to that moment, we're going to be, it was almost as if you'd seen our agenda. We're going to be going into like, what does that look like? And how do you start that? I want to, just because I want you to have your break, I'm going to end here. But when we come back, Stacey and Lou have put some really wonderful things in the chat too for you to be able to take a look at. So I think it's over to Vicky to bring us to the break.
Thanks, Stephanie. Wow, I'm really enjoying this. I hope you all are too. Quickly before the break, I know quite a few people mentioned that they hadn't seen the pack that we sent out before. So I think Catherine is going to share a link to that in the chat. So hopefully that will come up for you soon. I don't think there's anything else to say before we break, other than what time, Steph, what time do you want people back? I think we were going to have 10 minutes. Yeah, so 16 minutes past. Kate, was there something that you wanted to add?
Right, perfect. See you at 16, maybe 17 minutes past.
17 minutes
The
past.
clock's ticked on 1 minute.
Oh, enjoy a break and we'll see you soon. Everyone's making their way back. Thank you for rejoining us. We'll give it a few more seconds and then I'll hand over to Stephanie to take us to introduce the next part of this visit.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. So we have talked a little bit about organising and we've had some conversations, but now we want to introduce you to some fantastic organisers who are going to share about their work, and then there's going to be space for questions, reflections about how that might translate into what you would like to do. So I would like to introduce Molly. Molly, give us a wave.
Hello.
Hey. So Molly is an organiser in Coventry. I've had the privilege to work alongside Molly for, I think, 4 years now. Molly, correct? Yeah, that was a nod of like long time. And Molly is an incredible organiser who mostly focuses around disability justice, and has done amazing work with young people who experience disabilities. As I shared earlier, 1 in 4 young people with a disability get to spend up to 1 hour outside of a weekend. And Molly and the team they're called Coventry Youth Activists, Molly will be sharing more about that, have been tackling all sorts of ways in which to address those issues. And we shared earlier about those commas and the small steps. I think Molly will also be talking about how it really started with people that, for example, hadn't been spoken to in such a long time, to now taking on Facebook. Facebook is coming to Coventry for one of the biggest negotiations yet around online hate and online violence. So Molly will be talking about that. I'm also joined by our brand new colleague, Louis Herbert. Say hello.
Hi. Hi.
We are so fortunate to have Louis join the team. Louis is one of the founders of Acorn. I think it's one of, or the largest community union in our country. Yeah, I'm right. Okay, I don't want to exaggerate, but I think that's true. Louis has done significant things with many others fighting for housing rights, has won thousands and thousands, in the hundreds of thousands of pounds of repairs for ordinary people, led by ordinary people. And so you're going to be learning from Louis a little bit about that kind of work and also his work around debt. And finally, we are joined by Dami McKinday, who I have known for 7 years, maybe more. Hey, Dami. Dami's joining us to speak about her work around immigration. So Dami has worked with many other young people fighting for, it started off as scholarships and fighting for the right to learn for young people with precarious immigration status and young people who are undocumented. And Dami has won one of the biggest gains in immigration of my generation anyway, in probably one of the most hostile times for immigration of my generation, and has been able to win the pathway to citizenship for young people used to be 10 years. Dami and the team have been able to reduce that to 5 years for young people accessing their citizenship. So Dami's going to speak about that work too. And before I bring you into breakout rooms, there is one person who can't be here today, who is meant to be here today, who I want to name. Her name is Sofia Torres Lopez. She is a organizer who organizes, she is a cleaner and she organizes in her workplace. She has won thousands of pounds for cleaners who have not been paid their sick pay, who have not been paid their annual leave. She won a huge win against Topshop. And she is not here today because when it got back to her manager that she would be talking about the power of organizing and what we can do, she was told that she wouldn't have a job to come back to. So I'm bringing that into this space around zero contract hours, and when we are subcontracting, that there are brilliant people there organizing and doing incredible things, but this is the reality for lots of people who are doing this work. So yeah, I wanted to bring her into this space even though she couldn't be here today. So I'm going to hand over back to Vicky, who I think is going to put us into breakout rooms. to do some learning with these incredible organisers.
So yes, Kate, I know you've been working behind the scenes. We're
ready.
Breakout rooms.
So I'm going to open up those rooms now and enjoy these conversations. I think they're going to be really, really exciting and inspiring. Off we go.
Yeah, I think I'm...
Welcome back, everyone.
It's lovely to see all the faces pop back up. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that was really interesting and helpful. I'm sure it was. Our room definitely was. We are going to go for a break in a moment, but Stephanie, I don't know if you want to introduce what we're going to be doing after the break.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for everybody. Thank you for Molly and everybody in our breakout space. We had like the time, we got booted out again. So after the break, what we're going to do is we're going to use a Jamboard. If Jamboard doesn't feel good for you, you can also just pop it in the chat. We're just going to do a little bit of top level reflections of what was coming out of our conversations. And then we're going to move to, you might have heard the word one-to-one, building relationships. We're then going to move into that tool, and Catherine and Amani are going to help us, one, understand what it is, and we're going to have a practice and see what comes out of it. So that's after the break.
And Kate's just put the link to the Jamboard in the chat. So if you want to go in and have a look on the first page of the Jamboard, there is a question, what are we noticing? So if you want to start popping post-it notes in there or in the chat as we're coming back from the break, feel free to do that. We'll look forward to seeing you in 10 minutes. Does that sound good?
Yeah, 25 past.
Brilliant. See you.
And while we're waiting, Vicky, there's a request for Twitter handles of the ABC team. So Louis, I know you're here, maybe you can get the ball rolling if you're on Twitter and share your Twitter handle in the chat, and then we can ask the others to do it when they're back as well.
I mostly use Twitter for Leeds United, so it might not be as relevant as people are hoping, but I will put it in the chat anyway.
Hey, you know what? There might be Leeds fans here. We just don't know.
We just don't know. Yeah. Not even updated with my new job role. I need to do that.
Welcome to everyone who's coming back. We'll give it another half a minute before we start again.
And I'll just reshare the Jamboard link in the chat that we're going to be using in a moment. If you haven't clicked on that already, now is a great time to do that. I missed off an H. Let me resend that link. I was like, it's not clickable. Something's not working. Let's try that one. There we go. That's the Jamboard link now. You can see it.
You can see some people going into the Jamboard, which is great. And I'm looking at Stephanie. Should I hand over to you?
Yeah, so we're gonna hand over to Catherine for this bit.
Lovely. So welcome back, everybody. Thanks for just popping cameras on. We know that you're there. So we're just going to do a bit of reflection before we move into the next part, where we're going to be looking at one-to-one conversations. We've had a Jamboard open. I think people have been contributing. I wonder if we can just see that up on the screen. Is that all right?
Of course. Do you want me to give a quick explanation of how to add stuff? Is that helpful?
That would be good, because I think if we take 5 minutes now for people to add to this, so just a walk through how to do would be great.
Great. So this is Google Jamboards, and there's the first of 3, but you only need to worry about this first page for now. And if you'd like to add something to the Jamboard, you go over to this icon over here, which is the sticky note. You click on it, and then you can write something that you want to write as your reflection and click save. And then you can move it around the page wherever you want to go. If you have any issues with Jamboard or it's stressing you out, please don't sit there and be stressed. Just send me a message in the chat and I can add something for you. So yeah, very relaxed if it doesn't feel comfortable to use.
Fab, thank you. So let's do that then. Let's do a combination of the Jamboard. And just a reminder, Kate, of where folk are going for the links. I know they'll be in the pack. Are they also in the chat further
It's in
up?
the chat, yeah. I've just sent it. I'll just send it one more time just in case anyone missed it. There we go, it's in the chat.
And do add into the chat if you're more comfortable to do that, and we'll populate the Jamboard. So we're going to take just 4 or 5 minutes together to do this in quiet, and then we'll do a reflection. We'll look together at what's coming up on the Jamboard and do a reflection together.
I'm loving reading these, such lovely reflections.
So there's some really beautiful stuff starting to come onto the board. We've got the importance of small steps, you know, how we often hold smallness in our heads as a bad thing, but actually it's the small steps that build the work. Got the power of the collective voice. Quite a few of you are adding comments around the discipline, the patience, the perseverance. So playing the long game, building it slowly. And then what's interesting as well is a few people have put comments on that relate to resilience and how do we care for each other as we do this work. So reference to us as individuals, our personal ability to keep going, but also how organisers support each other as communities and teams. Louis, I just want to bring you in here and see if you want to add any reflections on that, because I know that was a theme that came out in the breakout conversation you led.
I mean, nothing really that's on there. It's just really nice to see it all reflected here as a group, you know. Yeah, sorry, Catherine, I don't have anything instantly in my mind there for you.
There's a few being added, which is where we're going to go with our one-to-one, around what this means for those of us who are working in healthcare or are working with people in health and care. So what does it look like to develop community organising in healthcare settings? What are the role of organisations to support this work? So we'll bring that theme out as well in the part that we do next. If possible, could we just have it back up one more time so everybody can see on the screen if you're not able to access? There we go, we'll just have a quick look at this. Joy and energy is a huge one. So there's a lot here, which I guess isn't surprising, that's values-based. You know, the work that connects with our own sense of purpose, our mission, our personal values and how we share them. And again, just to kind of round off this piece, I'm struck by how many links there are here to some of the methods that we use in improvement work, which is all about connecting to people's purpose and paying attention to our own sense of mission, our own energies for change as we do the work. So please do keep adding to this and add to the chat box as well as we go through the next session. We're going to be opening up a session now on one-to-ones. We're going to see a model of a one-to-one. But before we do that, Steph, we're going to bring you back in to do some of the context setting around what do we mean specifically in community organising when we talk about one-to-ones.
So thank you. Thank you for all of your reflections. And before even that, it's like, why do we have one-to-ones? And there is something about organising that we have. You'll hear, you probably heard in the rooms, people talking about leaders and leadership. So don't get away from those Jamboards too quick, because if you go to slide 2 of the Jamboard, which you can just click at the top, I'd love it if we could get some reflections on what does leadership mean to you? Because we have one-to-ones with lots of leaders. And I'd really like to understand what leadership means to this space. Oh, already there's some post-it notes already. We're just going to do that for about 3 minutes. And then we're going to have a conversation together. Okay, again, would you mind sharing the Jamboard screen for me? Thank you. And thank you, Kate, Vicky, and Catherine for all the work like you're doing behind the scenes as well to keep us all together. What I was reflecting on, by the way, when I was looking at the Jamboard, the first Jamboard, was I felt like you'd all been to some community organising training, or you'd been writing lots and lots of notes as folks were speaking to you. Because I was like, oh, I like some of this language popping up. But what does leadership mean to you? We've got power with, not power over. Lets others grow and shine. People who drive the change, facilitating change. It's not about grade and status. I've worked with Catherine a little bit with the School for Change Agents, and I remember having so many conversations with people telling me that people weren't addressing them by name in their work. They were being addressed by their grade, and I were outside of that context, so I really didn't understand what that meant actually. So seeing that it's not about grade and status, make change feel safe, action, role modeling. There's so much on this Jamboard, and it's making me think about, you know, the responsibility of being able to hold all of those things, to hold all of those practices of leadership. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about what leadership means. Keep putting them on as I'm speaking. But what does leadership mean in organising, and how is the one-to-one so central in developing that leadership? And so, first of all, organising is a methodology amongst many other methodologies. And sometimes we can romanticize those practices or put them with other practices, but actually organising is a methodology, and that practice can be used for good. It can also be used in ways that doesn't build for many of us the worlds as we would like it to be. And it is a leadership practice. It is a leadership methodology. And we understand leadership as supporting others to be able to act in uncertainty. So it is about bringing others with you. So you may have a position or role, but in organising, we ask that question: can you bring people with you? And even if you have that role, or you sit in that hierarchy and you struggle to bring people with you, organisers would put a question on, in terms of organising practice, whether that is leadership. And so we believe that leadership is a practice that all of us can build. We also believe that if we go back to what Amani was talking about as well with that snowflake structure, that in order for us to change the things that we want to change, it's going to require many of us stepping into this type of leadership. And a core part of that is those conversations. And I would say in my room that I was, where Molly was speaking, it was like, but how do we bring some of these tools into, you know, our quite different contexts? And I would say that the one-to-one, why we wanted to bring it into this space is, you don't need permission to have one-to-ones. We can step into that agency and we can choose them if they feel useful to us. But we can have these conversations about developing each other's leadership, curiosity, and power, that ability to act, to make those changes happen. Amani, would you be able to share some slides for me? That's okay. Thank you. I'm going to share some slides now around what it is and what it isn't. So it would be slide 10, Amani, when you're able to. Thank you. So the one-to-one, it's not magic. It's a conversation with a structure, and it is a public focused conversation. So these are conversations where we're discussing public work, so that external facing things that we want to change. Be it that we want to change the way like our meetings are run. We want to change the fact that universities aren't providing any scholarships for young people. These are conversations about public things that we want, that we know that is going to require the collective to solve. It is not an interview. It is not a one-way transactional conversation. It is not therapy, and it is not a chat. It is a public focused conversation. And it is not bringing any judgment to those other ways of having conversations. What it is saying is to notice that when we are bringing one-to-ones in, that they have a particular way of working. It is face-to-face, or it can be over Zoom. One-to-ones aren't over the phone or an email. I meet many organisers who tell me, oh, I had some great one-to-ones. And then I ask about them and they tell me about their inbox. Like, that is not a one-to-one. It might have a relational element to it potentially, but it is not a one-to-one. We're going to fishbowl. So we're going to practice. You're going to look inside at myself and Amani having a conversation around these probing questions over prying questions. So when I first started working with Molly, a probing question could be to a young person who first of all said, I don't think there's anything wrong. I'm really happy with my life. And if we remember those young people, 1 in 3, an hour outside of a weekend, I like being at home. A probing question could be, yeah, but if you could have something different, something more joyful, what would it look like? Well, it would be like this. Okay, why can't you have that now? Well, I don't know. Well, let's have a think. Think a little bit more. What's stopping you from being able to have that life now? If we started with just, okay, that's fine. We're not going to be able to move into the world as it is and the world as we would like it to be. Or a probing question could be in the space of apathy. Nothing changes around here. Is that true? Is that true that nothing changes? Have you never experienced change? Oh, well, there was this one time. Oh, tell me a little bit about that time. They are equally shared. So I share story, the other person shares story. We have skin in the game around why we want to make these changes happen. It is around 40 minutes in length. There's an asterisk against that because, for example, with the work that Molly does, if you were in Molly's room, Molly does lots of work around disability justice. Sometimes those conversations need to be a bit longer. Sometimes they might need to be a bit shorter, but traditionally they are 40 minutes in length. And the reason for that is that time is life. And so when we say to somebody that we're going to have 40 minutes, they know that you're going to respect their time. And if it needs to go longer, then we can book in another meeting. But it's really hard to build those cultures, those snowflake models of that collective ambition to grow and change things if we don't respect people's time. And good one-to-ones end with next steps. It could be another meeting. It could be coming along to something. It could be, oh, I know I said nothing ever changes here, but Jenny, she makes change happen on this street. You should go speak to Jenny. Oh, could you give me Jenny's details? Which number does Jenny live at? Could you introduce me? That could be a next step. Next slide, please, Amani. So the method of the one-to-one, and Amani and I are going to practice it very briefly, and then you're going to have a go at them, is we do tell people why we're meeting up. We explain where we're coming from, and then we ask some of those probing questions, and we invite people also to ask us them, like, well, why do you care? Why are you telling me that, like, I should care about this? You share ways in which, like, there could be possibilities to work together. We thank people for their time. We will reflect on how that conversation went. That might be with yourself, or it could be if you've started to build that snowflake, you might reflect together. And we always follow up. So that if we've said that we're going to invite them to a meeting, or we said that we're going to actually introduce them, because sometimes it's not about the organizer being introduced, it's about introducing people to others. Like Molly got that relationship with Patagonia all by themselves. It's like you can introduce people that can open up other doors for other people, that we always follow up. So I'm now going to have a conversation with Amani for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to have you're going to have a go, and then we're going to reflect back together, if that's all right. So hello, Amani.
Hello, Steph.
Hey, so I've heard from a few people that I've been working with that you're somebody that I should be really speaking to you. So just to give you a little bit of a context, I work for an organisation called At-Will Change, and we've been doing quite a bit of work with young people, thinking about different actions they want to take, but actually what keeps coming up is around like confidence and leadership. And so I just started to speak to a couple of people, and Amani, I can't tell you how many times your name has come up, but you've been a really hard person to get in touch with. So I'm so glad that you've been able to find the time. And I'd just like to learn a little bit about who you are and like, why do you care about this? And I'm really happy to share a little bit too about why I care about these young people. But yeah, would it be all right to like learn a little bit about you and your work and why that matters to you?
Yeah, sure. So, well, yeah, we've finally had the time to meet with each other now. I work with young people, often young leaders who are passionate about making change in their communities. My work with young people around youth voice and youth participation was born out of the work that I was doing with care experienced young people who are often having decisions made about them, their lives and their futures without much input from them themselves. especially when they were leaving the care system. As care experienced young people stepping into the next phase of their adulthood, often decisions being made for them, but it was really important for me to have young people's voices heard at all the centre of that in terms of their decision making. And that's grown into youth leadership, youth character development for all young people generally, regardless of what their lived experience and background may be.
And Imani, sorry to interrupt you, but you said that's really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to you that young people get to represent themselves. Why? For lots of people, it isn't important. Why is it important to you?
Yeah, I think I've always been fortunate to be one of those young people who was quite vocal, and I was able to articulate, I say that in inverted commas, and speak up for myself and be quite quietly confident, whereas other young people didn't necessarily always get that opportunity. My mum was also a foster carer, so I'd also seen firsthand where young people's voices and the children that she fostered voices were missing in a lot of those conversations. So I've seen where it can be done really well, where young people are able to self-advocate, and I've seen where it doesn't happen at all. So yeah, that's, I guess, my passion comes from both my own personal experience of being able to have those opportunities, but seeing in other spaces where young people didn't have that.
So Imani, when you're speaking, I'm hearing like that you've got a real recognition for like some of the gifts that you got from others to be able to have that quiet confidence. What did that confidence help you achieve? That being able to speak up, how did that shape your life?
Yeah, well, I think I've taken like a traditional route in terms of my own career development. I've been able to go off to university, which opened up more doors and opportunities for me. Been able to have quite a few twists and turns, I guess, on my own leadership journey. I've been fortunate to have good mentors and practitioners who I've been able to work with and who've championed me and my work. I think that quiet confidence and the skills that I've had there have been able to push doors open for me academically, but personally as well, to grow my own leadership.
And I've heard from so many others that you are a fantastic coach. And is that coaching also coming from those experiences of mentorship, or is there other reasons why also you think about, that coaching space for young people?
Yeah, I think coaching is definitely a space that I've fell into. I was a mentor for many years, but then saw the benefit of coaching as well. So when I certified as a coach, that was also an opportunity for me to work with adults who are working with those young people, or other people who were campaigning and working on different projects, but also to use coaching with young people to be able to see that they don't have to be defined by lots of the labels that are there, that are often placed on them. So being able to broaden their minds, able to see that there's opportunities out there, and use coaching as a tool to build self-awareness for what people are able to achieve.
I'm really aware, like you've been sharing a lot. I think, do you want to hear a little bit about why I care about this work?
Yeah, because you've come on my radar as well, and it's good that we're now in this space with each other.
I hope it's a good signal.
Lots of synergy in our work. So I was going to say, like, what's brought you here into this space as well?
Yeah, so specifically, like, why I'm really interested in working with young people and thinking about how they are centered is that in my own story, I at school, I loved learning, actually. I really, really loved it. But I was quite vocal, let's say. And also my middle brother and my little brother, we were going through tricky times. And for me, I was towards the later end of that. So I was able to, like, I had enough time at school, but especially for my younger brother, things got really tricky. And then all of a sudden you were making me think about that because you talked about labels. So I was curious, a little bit disrupted. Maybe that label was put on me towards the end, but for most of my learning time in an education institution, I was a little bit naughty, but often called quite curious and
I prefer curious.
Yeah. And my little brother was getting labels like difficult child, aggressive, and there was things about that like, you know, I wonder around that space of mentorship. You know, you talked about mentorship and coaching. I would have no idea that existed when I was younger. And so there's something about working with young people that's really important to me, because I know the paths that can be set. And my mum was a teacher, and I used to sit, I used to live quite far away from my school. And so I'd wait for my mum to finish school, and I'd sit on the table where like the naughty kids would be sat for detention. And I'd have to sit there, and like the students thought like I was the teacher's pet, but really I was just waiting for my mum to come and pick me up because I didn't want to get on the bus. And I would hear all the stories of younger people. They were my age, and the challenges that they were going through and the ways in which discipline was used. And they were so creative. Some of them were absolutely hilarious. And there was so much that was possible for them. But you talked about labels, and I wonder what would have happened also to them if they had those kinds of opportunities. So now like, let's speed up 15 years later. I'm really interested in how we work with young people to be able, for example, in an education institution, to be talking about, you know, how does that get shaped? The things that we learn, how we learn in ways that are like more caring, but also what do we do to be able to change those things? And so the reason why I got in touch with you, Imani, is that although we haven't met, what I hear is that there are things around that I know that you're interested in too. And so I would be, if it would be possible, I would really like it if you could come along to a training that we're having with some of these young people, and just observe to see what you think of it. But the reason why I'm asking you that is that I would really like to find ways in which we could potentially have more of these conversations and do some work together. But I know that like you're very serious about your time, and lots of people are asking you of your time. So I don't want to waste it, but I think that there could be some things that you would be excited by if you gave it a chance to take a look. So what do you think about that?
I'd be up for that, and I'd be really interested to hear who else you've got in mind and who else you would like to be connected to see if there's other people we can bring into these conversations.
Thank you. Okay, folks, I'm just going to stop there. Normally that conversation would be 40 minutes long, but I wanted to give you a sense of the types of questions that you could ask. Amani, you were very nice. Oh yeah, and I'll give you I'll connect you to people. And like, so that was very fortunate, but I imagine in the maybe in the first ever conversation, there might have actually been a bit more tension actually. Like, you know, I've built these relationships for a really long time. Am I going to take a leap of faith with this person? And we did take that leap of faith actually, but that's a year and a half now. But I wanted to ask people, what did you notice in that conversation? You can put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand with the emoji, but what did you notice about that conversation?
Also, I'm just seeing Kate's.
Do you want to go, Vicky, or I can bring in Kate?
I was just going to say that it felt, even though it was short, it felt quite spacious. Like you were really giving each other time.
So there was a sense, there was a sense of space, not rushing. And this came up in the breakout space that Molly was holding around this urgency. And we often talk about in organising, like the urgency of now and the patience of trust, and how they are often like bumping together. We've got personal story. And so, we both shared story. And we call this often like a public narrative. So these are narratives that we want to share in the public work that are authentic and true. And actually, I didn't know what I was going to bring into that conversation, but when Amani said labels, it brought me back to a real time of how those labels can really, can really limit. And also the labels that of like being curious and cheeky can also be like really privileged. I'm curious and cheeky, little bro is disruptive and angry. I also learned so much about Amani in that very brief time. Like I didn't know that actually around the access to mentorship that has helped guided you, Amani. I didn't know that. That's something that I've learned just now around always like that being present in your life. There's the possibility for what it looks like is open, bringing together your personal and professional. Madeline, a certain amount of vulnerability. I've been talking too much today, blah, blah, blah. Vulnerability. And it is a certain amount. And it's those probing questions support that vulnerability, which is the difference to a prying question. So Amani talked about labels, but I didn't say to Amani, what kind of labels have you been called, Amani? That's a prying question. Amani's already told me that there is a labeling that is happening and that it has informed Amani's practice. If I ask that prying question, that is not adding anything to it, but that is overstepping that boundary. And that's why one-to-ones, people say, oh, it's just a chat, but actually these things take practice around getting those probing and prying questions correct, because I've experienced, people from a very, sometimes often unconscious way, prying questions that I'm like, what's this got to do with this conversation? Digging down the why. Oh, somebody else spoke, I think.
No, it was just me jumping in.
Yeah, go on, please, Amani, jump in.
Mutual sharing and not just questioning, so that it doesn't feel like an interview.
And how did that feel for you, Amani?
I think it's much more authentic in that sense. It doesn't feel extractive. And I guess on the point of like not probing, trying to keep those questions open and not asking why questions, sticking to the what and the how, and a why question can often sound quite judgmental. So yeah, I found that useful in this context.
Yeah, and like, who taught you that? Yeah, I'm going to take that actually. That's really, I haven't thought about it in that way about the why question. There is something also around, it could have been, so I'm talking about, again, I'm using organizing language, take what you need from it into your own context. But so we talk about the word leader. And actually, when we're working with a leader who may not have had a one-to-one before, they might not expect you to then say, well, do you want me to tell you a little bit about why I care about this? So many people are used to being interviewed. Many people are used to being consulted. And it's the role of an organizer or somebody stepping into this to say, I know that you've been sharing quite a bit. Would you like to know a little bit about why I care about this? To create that space. In my experience, especially with younger people, but not always, sometimes also they may go into that space where they may want to overshare, and it can be like an interruption around like, okay, but I actually want to talk about this, or I'm going to share a little bit about me now, to hold that containing. How do you encourage people to open up when a person is reluctant to share? Antonia, that's a wonderful question. And I have a few responses to that, which is, and I want to open it up to my colleagues actually, if that's okay, because I think all of us will have different thoughts around it. But with one-to-one, sometimes it won't be, Amani is meeting me because I have spoken with people that Amani respects and trusts, who have said it might be a good thing to speak to Steph. So I've done my relational work outside to be like, actually, I want to have this conversation with this person. And so there's stuff outside that can support, for example, that reluctance. But also, I guess there is something around really respecting that as well. And those questions can help that reluctance. So for example, those younger people that Molly was speaking about, who were also, there's been a real shift actually the past year, which is really exciting, around attention, a real reluctance from some of those younger people to say that there are things in this world that aren't good enough because they've had an expectation to be grateful. And so sometimes it takes time. It takes asking those questions of like, yeah, but if you could dream something else, what would it look like? Oh, I'd like it like this, and shifting the conversation to somewhere else. If you feel that resistance, I would also respect that, because sometimes it can be the other way, and you might want to you know, resist back. So it's also respecting it, and it might be asking something different or moving the conversation somewhere else, but also getting those relationships so that you won't be the best person often the first time anyway. It's other people doing those introductions. I just wanted to open up. Stacey, it was lovely being in space with you as well. Take care. I wanted to ask Louis, Amani, or Catherine if you have any reflections around that reluctance to share, or even like getting that first conversation going. Go on, Louis.
I'm happy to talk a little bit. I spoke a bit about some of this in some of our group. I mean, some of it is like sharing yourself really helps other people want to share. You know, like letting them know your reasons for being there will make them much more likely to want to talk about their own. And then I think it'll depend a little bit on like what their reluctance to share is based upon. I think if it's based upon shame or stigma, then that's like can be really challenging to get through. It's something I've done quite a bit of work on. But you know, often talking about kind of again why you're there and about how you like understand that issue probably help people. And the other thing that we spoke quite a lot about in our group as well is, you know, trying to ask questions that allow people to feel some emotion as well. People are much more likely to share if you're actually able to tap into some of their emotions around those issues. Whether that's about anger or whether that's about hope can be different. But asking questions that allow you to talk about people's feelings, and again, you talking about your own feelings, should be able to move them a little bit more into a space where they're able to share.
Thank you. Catherine and Amani, do you want to add any other final reflections before we move on?
I've got one. Amani, do you want to add anything? Can't see you on my screen.
No, Catherine, Amani's saying it's good.
Okay. So I guess I just wanted to tie some threads together around the question of reluctance, and it's really drawing on Louis what you were saying and Steph what you were saying. I think the hardest bit of this work is to embrace that there are many ways of knowing and many ways of being. And particularly in the culture of health and healthcare, that's quite a countercultural thought. So when you're in a one-to-one and you sense, and your gut is that there's resistance or reluctance, it's acknowledging that in yourself and listening to those instincts. And then the second thing is being open to why. So the data you might be receiving is that there's resistance or reluctance, and just trying really hard to stay open to the stories that you're telling yourself as an organizer about what that resistance or reluctance is, and not closing down your own mental model too quickly. They're resistant because of that, or they're feeling this. Like, that's your story. The data is there's something here that isn't working, and staying open to what that is. So the final reflection, Steph, would be, this is emotionally demanding work. And we bring more of us into it than we traditionally do when we have a role, such as nurse, porter, quality improvement manager. And your personal and private is so important. It's public, but it does ask something of us personally, and staying open to that possibility in a one-to-one is important.
Thank you, Catherine. And it was actually making me think about our first breakout room. I had the privilege of being in the room with Charisse, Tracy and Sophia. And Cherise shared something that really made me smile that I could imagine in a one-to-one, which was about being late with a little one and trying to explain to their little one, I'm going to be late. And then after a while saying, do you know what I mean by being late? And the little one said, no. And like we were laughing at that. And there was something, Cherise, that when you were speaking, it really made me think about assumptions, and one-to-ones help us really think about those assumptions, and knowledge and language. And then Sophia, you shared about sharing a story that you thought was not really that significant, and people saying, you should do something with this. You should do something with, like, be it a TED talk or talk to, like, that the reception that you got about taking that brave step. And there is something about when we share our one-to-ones, which is around those brave steps. It is around, like, the joys of those conversations that we're having and catching ourselves sometimes. And I just wanted to go, before we go and have some more conversations and try it out, and we're going to have a full 30 minutes for this, I wanted to share to you why we have these conversations and what we're looking for. So Amani, would you be able to share slide 13 for me? So why we do one-to-ones is that we are listening for things. So we are listening for hope. Is there a possibility of change? Because Amani didn't say, I think that this would work, but nothing ever changes. Amani, I could sense when Amani was speaking, I'm speaking with somebody who wants to bring other people with them. I can see that there's this problem, and these are ways in which I think that it could be changed. There was a sense of hope for these young people, a sense of hope, of possibility. I didn't get in that time, which I would have wanted to, is around the anger. So sometimes what Louis brought it in, the anger, which is like that cold anger of, like, the world as it is, that tension of world as it is and world as it should be. It got touched on a little bit around the labels. I brought in anger with a bit of my story, is that I'm also doing this, not just because from a place of charity, I'm doing it from a place of, I'm angry about those conversations that I had to listen to at that table at my mum's school, and why, and what was happening as a result of, like, people judging who were grown-ups, and these young people were about 12. We are listening for story, and we are listening for challenges. If we go to the next slide, please, Amani. And with that, we are thinking about, how do we connect? So if we go back to that snowflake, I've now spoken to Amani. I'd already said I've spoken to a few other people. Could I bring these people together to be like, let's have an interesting conversation about the possibilities for young people in Birmingham, or maybe we're going to do it bigger than that, or maybe we're going to just do it on our street. And we're doing it to build that relational power, that ability to act, because in organising, we only work on the issues that the collective can solve. And I think most of the issues that we are wrestling with in our time requires the collective. And we talked a lot about in our breakout room about how we do that with care, with joy, with a sense of solidarity. But we believe in organising that the bedrock of that is those one-to-one conversations about getting to understand each other, what it is that we want to change, and really believing that we can. So if we go back a slide, Amani, we're going to get into pairs now to have these conversations together for our last bit, and then we're going to reflect on the tool. So why did you decide to show up and give your time to the NHS? Whatever role that you come in, you didn't have to. Why did you choose to? What motivated you? Why does that matter? And see where that conversation takes you for half an hour. And think about those probing questions. And in the back of your mind, where are those bits of hope? Where are those things of, like, tension? Leadership resources. In 5-10 minutes, I learned Amani can coach, mentor, has relationships with young people. I could already tell in the way that Amani was asking me questions, Amani is curious. There are all these things that I'm like, oh, there's so much that we could potentially bring together. And we are listening for challenges, because challenges are that space in which the change happens. Where are those moments of challenge that we want to bring about change? So for the final time, I think, the breakout spaces, Kate is going to put people into pairs, and we're going to have a conversation around that. And then we're going to come together and then bring our time together to a close.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm just doing a bit of jiggling because I can see some people have to step out at this point. So I just need 30 seconds. Have a moment to yourselves.
Every device I own is dying. Like running out of plugs.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the session. Welcome. Yeah, sorry Vicky, I think we said at the same time.
You go, Catherine. I think you're
Yeah.
going to lead us into some reflection.
That's right. So welcome back. Just give everybody a chance to arrive back into a bigger space. I feel like today has flown by. It never quite feels like enough time, but we are in our final reflection session, and it is a chance for us to just take a moment to pause and think about the experience and what you were noticing from the experience. I'm going to take a moment, Steph, just to note that by its definition, community organising work is experiential. So it's part of why I think just taking the moment to think about what the actual experience of doing it, of the practice, was like. So we're going to be asking you to return to the Jamboard again. And there's 3 slides there. So you'll see the first 2 are populated with all of our contributions. So we're asking you to move to the 3rd slide. As ever, please do use the chat box as well if you'd like to. And we're going to ask you just to take 5 minutes or so again, just to share your thoughts on what you were noticing during your one-to-ones.
Would anyone like a quick visual on how to find the 3rd jam, or give me a thumbs up if you're all right? Okay, great. I'm seeing thumbs.
So my Jamboard is starting to dance. I don't know about other people's as the post-its move around.
Yep.
And Imani, I'm going to ask you whenever you're ready, maybe a couple more minutes for people to share, maybe to lead off with some reflections on what you're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I can start with sharing some of what I can see. From what I can see, it seems like people were able to experience the power of the unexpected connections that happen when we're able to share stories with one another, and that in each of those conversations there's always something that you're able to take away, and that the passion that comes with that openness and honesty of reflecting, and that the human connection and human element can sometimes feel hard, but when both people are sharing, it takes on more of a coaching style than that interviewing structure. But yeah, from what I'm seeing, it's the power of the one-to-one here really is for people to connect on a deeper level, and often hearing more about your own experiences through others and seeing that synergy and connection that comes through. Anything that you wanted to add to that there, Catherine, that you're also seeing?
Yeah, it's making me smile. I think they're less scary than I thought. I know that feeling so well. I think some of the things that came through on our first jam boards around the energy, the hope, the joy that we can get from just connecting and being with each other as people, I think we're seeing on this board as well. A few comments about time going really quickly. So Steph referred before to 40 minutes being a really important, if you like, kind of boundary to have in our mind. And I think part of the reason for that is to leave a conversation at a point where you have, in the best sense, unfinished business.
Mm-hmm.
Reasons to re-meet, more that you want to do and share together. Is again a really important sort of litmus test for why that is a gentle rule to try and keep the conversations shorter than we might do if we were simply having a non-public conversation with someone. Again, going to open it up, Steph and Louis, if you want to notice anything on the board, and then maybe come to hands up as well for contributions.
I really like this comment about developing a deeper level of understanding about your own experiences during a one-to-one. And I think that's particularly interesting because it made me just reflect a bit on how that happens more and more the more one-to-ones that you have, and you start to learn particularly like which ones of your own experiences actually really did like form your politics, and which of your own experiences like most connect with the types of people you're interacting with. Like I think through my one-to-ones now, I've developed a bit of a bank of stories that when I'm having one-to-ones with people, I kind of almost feel which one of my bank of stories I'm going to be able to bring in that's going to bring like a nice connection with that person.
Louis, can I ask you a question that often comes up? So often when we're exploring this work and thinking about how it could apply, for example, in a healthcare context, a workplace, how do you keep your stories fresh? And what I mean by that is not instrumentalizing them, like not making them a thing that you just like bring out of a box. Can you tell us a bit about how you think about that and how you ensure that they are truly meaningful and authentic?
Wow, that is a big question. Yeah, I feel you have. Funny actually, we talked about in our little breakout about self-reflection that somebody else brought up a little bit, and definitely like you do need to self-reflect after a one-to-one if you feel like a story is becoming mechanical. I think often it does if you tell it too many times and exactly the same way, and you should be able to like notice when that's happening and to try and find like new stories or like new ways of talking about things so that it doesn't. I'm a little bit lucky and I'm a little bit practiced in that from like other work. I used to do charity fundraising work where I was like doing like chugging in the streets where you're talking to people and saying almost the same thing in like a 3-minute spell. And through that, I think I learned some of the skills that allow you to inject emotion into it. One of the key things that is just a very simple technique that I can offer for people that allows you to do it is to pause after you've said something which you want to have impact. Because if you do that, it'll often have impact on you as the speaker, as well as the person who you're talking to. And so if you've said something which you know should generate emotion, just give a little bit of time, literally a couple of seconds beat for you to feel that emotion. And that should like reconnect you to what it is you're saying and why you're talking about it. and allow that same emotion to happen in the person you're talking to as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me anyway. I'm going to check back in. Imani, did you want to add anything from, you're keeping a wily eye on other contributions coming in on the post-its as well?
I was just going to say that the power in just the connection that was coming from what I can see on the post-it notes, really.
So Steph, will come to you and encourage others also to put your hands up if you want to offer a reflection into the room. Steph.
Yeah, so I was looking at the post-it notes, and I'm just going to lower my hand. The post-it note that says passion, stories, ideas, even a cunning plan. That's the one that I'm drawn to. I'm not going to pry about that cunning plan, but there's something about that I think is really important to remember around why we do one-to-ones, which is, again, if I don't know if this, I brought this into the main space, but we did start talking about this in our breakout room with Molly, which again is that difference between empowerment and power. So we organize to build power, to make change happen. So there was something also shared in my first breakout room around, like, even with privilege and knowledge, still struggling to access certain things. And so that one-to-ones are action orientated. It doesn't mean your first one-to-one is there, but it isn't just about trying to create that sense of, it isn't only that sense of empowerment, which is that feeling of confidence, that feeling of being able to act. It is about to lead to power, which means that we will get enough relationships together to be able to change the very things that are stopping us from being able to act. And those two things are in tandem, but that post-it note, I was drawn to it because it was like feelings, good ideas, but also a plan. And that's what these are about. It's about how do we have these public conversations with each other that are very relational, but are also about moving the world as it is into the world as we would like it to be. So that stuck out to me of those post-it notes.
And I'll just add to the joy post-it note in terms of that stuck out to me when thinking about keeping those conversations energized as to why we're motivated, why are we still here, why do we show up and do the work that we do. Those conversations are what bring joy and energy for people, and again, leave people wanting to pick up where they left off with another conversation at another point. So yeah, the joy post-it notes look out for me in the sense of how do we keep the energy still, keep those conversations energized.
Yeah. Thanks, Imani. Thanks, Steph. There are a couple of post-it notes that refer to RCTs, so I'm just going to say a little bit about that. Not randomized control trials in this case, but for those who are using RCTs in the Q community, we're referring to randomized coffee trials. So this was an innovation trialed by an organisation called Nesta, which is a social purpose organisation, to help organisations and teams connect randomly across boundaries. And the question is, what makes this different? And I think, Steph, I'm going to channel something you said earlier about no judgment. All methodologies are wrong. Some of them are useful. We're talking about a particular method here, and it's not to the exclusion of other methods. But if I had to offer some observations about what is different, community organising one-to-ones generally are designed to elicit strong ties. So they're designed to find people, normally in a place or in a context that is closely knitted, who want to take action together through relationship on something that they are experiencing in a place. And that can be something that randomized coffee trials unearth. But actually the drive and the purpose of an RCT is to create a series of weak ties, if you like, a series of connections and conversations across a bigger space that enable new possibilities. So while where we go with both of them could be similar, because we might find somebody who shares our context, who wants to work on something and with whom we can build power, the starting point is slightly different for each of them. And again, I'm just going to invite anybody who wants to add to that, because maybe you've been part of an RCT and you're just making the connection in your head, or maybe there's another way of thinking about improvement work that you've been linked to and you want to share a connection. So Matthew, I'm going to pull you out in the chat in the absence of hands up, saying, I wonder whether just exposing people to these ideas, having good organisers, change agents, pirates in the room, people who bring heretical thinking into the room, means that things are guaranteed to emerge. I think it's a really interesting thought, isn't it? That there's another tension that we're holding. Louis alluded to it. We are in an organising space, orchestrating, convening, trying to act with strategic intent. And we have to be open to the possibilities that emerge. And often in our work in improvement, we are just trying to catalyse or spark things, aren't we? So this is another way of thinking, another way of being to add into our options when we're thinking about how we drive improvement in health or in healthcare. Marnie, anything that you want to add before we close the reflection? No.
No immediate reflections to add here.
Thanks. So Steph, going to hand across, I think, to you for the next part of the session.
And I'm going to ping pong it to Vicky.
Who's going to ping it to
I'm
me?
going to pass it on to Karen. Don't
Talk
worry, everyone,
about-
we won't keep going.
Passing the buck, eh? Thank you, everyone. We're going to hand back to Steph in a little while just to do some closing reflections. Then we've got a couple of things to say about closing this visit and telling you about the next couple of visits that are coming up. But I've spent a lot of the visit today in the main room, so I've not been privy to lots of the conversations, but it's been so lovely to hear the reflections that are coming back from the Jamboard and the chat, and just yeah, hearing those energies. And what I would really love is to invite you to complete this sentence in the chat. The most valuable learning I'm taking away from this morning's visit is. So we'd love to hear what's the most valuable learning you're taking away from the morning learning from At-Build Change. I'll just give you a couple of moments to do that. Thank you, Laura. The lovely reflections. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. So keep those coming if you're still finishing off what you're typing. And Steph, I think you had a couple of questions that you wanted to leave the group with, so I'll ping to you.
Yeah, so it's 3 questions. And Marnie, would you be able to share your screen for those? Thank you for doing it. My computer has decided it doesn't want to share screens today. So
Yeah, I'm just going to try and get that up because my laptop is overheating. 1 second.
So while Amani's bringing it up, fantastic. First question is, who are you currently building relationships with? So if you think about those one-to-one conversations, what does that look like for you now? Where do you have those weaker bonds and actually you'd like to strengthen them? So are there people that you could be having relationships with, but you aren't? And what would that look like? And maybe, as I said earlier, when me and Amani were speaking, it took, how many one-to-one to get to Amani actually? Maybe there's a bit of work that needs to be done to be able to build that trust. And this is a question that Amani brings to our table often, which is, What can you do now without any additional resources or tools to support change to happen? So what is in our possibility now? I'm sorry for the second question being worded strangely. I need to do that. That's me. But the third question, what can you do now without any additional resources to support change to happen? And I would just say for like 2 minutes, you can think about that, or you can free write, which means pen to paper. We don't stop the pen from moving. But what comes up for you when you think about those questions before we go to a final close with Vicky? And just so you know, we're not going to answer those questions. They're for you to think about your own private reflection.
I think we've got another minute for you to capture any reflections in response to these questions. All right, should we pause there, Stephanie? Anything else you want to say to close this reflection?
Just, yeah, thank you for your time. Thanks for being in this space and trying out the tools. And yeah, that's all I have to add.
Love that. Thank you. Well, we're going to invite you just to share a reflection with us using Mentimeter now. So I'm going to ask you to grab your mobile phone if it's close by. And we're going to invite you to go to www.menti.com. It's going to appear on the screen any second. So go to the website that you see at the top of the screen and then input the code that you see. And then we'd just love you to share one word to describe the visit. So let's get a sense of trying to encapsulate all of this learning and energy and inspiration into one word. And if you've contributed your words, you could enjoy the slightly hypnotic energy of the words shifting and changing on the screen as more and more people add their contributions. Just give the last few people another minute. And if you haven't come across Mentimeter before, the bigger the word, the more people have used it. So rest assured, we have been an inspiring collection of conversations this morning. So well done, all of you. Shall we pause there, Vicky, and take that down? Thank you so much, everyone. And just want to say a really massive thank you to all of the At Build Change team. So thank you to Imani, to Stephanie, to Catherine, to Molly, to Dami, to Louis, and to Sophia, who sadly wasn't able to be here, but has been part of the process of kind of prepping and planning for today. So yeah, I want to acknowledge Sophia as well. And a huge thanks to you. I mean, needless to say, the visits wouldn't be much without any participants. So thank you for your energy and engagement.